side event of the 38th session of the Universal Periodic Review, organized by the coordination of the Association on the People for Freedom of Conscience. CAPLC, a French NGO created in 2000, dedicated to the respect of the right of freedom of religion and belief. CAPLC is expert since now 20 years in religious minorities discrimination in France and Europe. CAPLC organized events, conferences, meetings to unite minorities religions to counter discrimination, mainly in France, but also in Europe and worldwide. The topic is the freedom of religion in Russian Federation and the identifier behind the bad religions concept. I inform you that this conference will be recorded. Then, if someone does not agree, please let me know before starting. Thank you. You will be hearing from 5 speakers that I'm going to introduce. Our first speaker is Mr. Peter Zoer, General Director of the Forum for Religious Freedom Europe. FOREF Europe is an independent secular civil society formation dedicated to defending the freedom of religions in accordance with international law. The NGO was founded in Vienna in 2005. FOREF Europe regularly reports to the media, OSCE, US State Department, and various other human rights organizations on religious freedom violation in the OSCE region and other countries. FOREF Europe has established an international scientific board of experts as well as inter-religious board. Since its establishment, FOREF Europe has achieved a number of important victories in helping victims of religious intolerance to gain respect for their rights and be vindicated from injustice, discrimination, and persecution. So I introduce Mr. Peter, that will give his viewpoint as a journalist.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So my presentation will be about the Russian Federation and religious freedom, the hidden factor behind the bad religion concept. And I thank you very much, Mr. Terry, for inviting me here. This is a very timely issue now, a very pressing issue actually. And this year, we celebrate 70 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as you may know. And it's time to review how much we could achieve, how much the governments try to really implement human rights in their policies. When we talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are especially focusing on Article 18, which many of my colleagues of human rights advocates call the mother of human rights. It's religious freedom. So everyone has the right of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. The religious freedom is really the bedrock of freedom rights. Also, freedom of thought and conscience, freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of peaceful assembly and association. If there is no religious freedom, all these other basic freedom rights are violated. Today we have a particular problem with in Europe regarding religious freedom if there is a strong national religion. And usually there are many minority religions in every European country. In Austria, where I come from, we have about 600 minority religions and only 17 officially recognized religions, and then the second level is 8 confessional communities. We have a 3-tiered religion law, which has been very much criticized internationally, because when you belong to one of these 600, you have no real corporate religious freedom. You may have individual religious freedom, but no corporate religious freedom. Does everybody hear me? Yeah. So in most European countries, we have this tense situation between the mainstream religions and the smaller religious groups. And this is now very apparent in Russia, or the Russian Federation. This is the chart, the map of Europe. You can see here the blue is dominated by Catholic, violet by Lutheran Protestant, and then green Islam, and red Orthodox. So there are platforms to address this issue, which give a framework to religious minority groups. Which one of them is the OSCE. This is where I regularly appear, or my colleagues, and also my colleague Jerry. I've met him there many times. We know each other since a long time, right?
Yes.
And but it's not really effective enough. But at least there's a framework where these issues can be addressed. This here are some of my colleagues from Forum, Human Rights Without Frontiers, and so on, making statements about religious freedom violations. But there is since very recently, actually 2014, 2015, there is another initiative which belongs to the European foreign policy, which is called FORB, Freedom of Religion or Belief. The European Union made a guideline on freedom of religion or belief beyond its borders. So this is a big improvement for religious minority groups outside Europe. Because the European Union is putting some pressures on countries which don't perform well on the religious freedom issue. And the special envoy for FORB is Dr. Jan Fiegel, EU Special Envoy on Religious Freedom. This picture is from an interview. FOREF, my human rights organization, we made an interview of Dr. Jan Fiegel, which was widely spread, actually, in the beginning of his assignment. And he is very, very good, and we are hoping that his mission, the mandate, will continue. This is what we are campaigning for. In theory, this is the theory, the FORB theory. In line with universal European human rights standards, the EU and its member states are committed to respecting, protecting, and promoting freedom of religion or belief within their borders. But the problem is, we call this internal and external coherence. There's an internal-external coherence problem. The European Union is demanding human rights standards, or monitoring human rights standards, which it fails to implement within its own borders. We call this, drinking wine and preaching water, or do as I say, but don't do as I do. I learned about this from my father. My father was a chain smoker, and every morning he was coughing a lot. And he said, "Boy, never smoke." His words didn't convince me, but his coughing convinced me. So, for example, I don't have enough time to just to show many examples. There are many examples, but you will hear from the experts on the panel about the other examples. Hungary, in 2011, the Prime Minister Viktor Orban deregistered over 200 small churches because he got two-thirds majority in parliament. He just deregistered them. Although later he had, this was opposed by the Constitutional Court, but not much has changed. You don't hear so much about this. You hear a lot about the media freedom, the violations against the freedom of media in Hungary, because the journalists, they write about that, but not about the religious freedom. They are not so interested in religious freedom, sadly to say. But we are pushing. So, and this is what just now, in fact, this is just 2018 this has happened. Some of you may be aware that in Russia they passed a law last year and they banned Jehovah's Witnesses. That means 175,000 members of the Jehovah's Witnesses were suddenly deregistered. Almost 400 churches, 400 of their temples in Russia, and you know, it looks like the Russian government is serious about it, because just now more than 7 raids happened. You know, raids, interrogations, detentions. You know, this special force, special police force moved in with black masks. And with some of them, they had machine guns and so on. Moved into Jehovah's Witnesses' homes and centers and raided them, interrogated them, questioned them, and so on. You know, the last one happened just April the 20th. It began January the 23rd, and these raids are taking place everywhere. Now, we just heard that more than 1,000 already fled Russia, more than 1,000 Jehovah's Witnesses. Many of them went to Finland or Sweden. And because the title of this, you know, the subtitle is "The Hidden Factor Behind the Bad Religion Concept." What is the hidden factor behind this bad religion concept? I would say it's somebody whispering into the ears of the Russian authorities. And this is the gentleman here. You know, the Federation of Centers of Research and Information on Sectarianism, FECRIS, is a French-based European umbrella organization of anti-cult groups all over Europe. It's called FECRIS. Acronym of this is FECRIS, and it was founded in 1994 by the French anti-sect movement, and the goal is to, from the start, to export the French anti-sect model in all European countries. European countries, and if possible beyond that. So since that time we have been working hard to kind of slow them down on this agenda, with more or less success, but we didn't succeed everywhere. Alexander Dworkin is the head, the president of the Russian Association of Centers for Religious and Sectarian Studies, and the vice president of FECRIS. You will hear more about him from some of my colleagues. As you can see, he is a Russian Orthodox, and one cannot help but suspect that this is an issue of big fish eats little fish. You know, but this is what we have human rights for. Human rights we have to protect minorities. And this should be taken serious. So last year, you know, in Vienna we have also the center of the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, with 57 membership states. And regular meetings are taking place there. And last year, at the Supplementary Human Dimension meeting, SHDM, with the title Freedom of Religion or Belief for All. This took place in June 22nd to 23rd. The French ambassador, Jean-Christophe Bouchel. I'm sorry about my French, but you know, this is one thing I never managed to learn French. My wife speaks very good French, but so he is the advisor for religious affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the French government. And imagine, you know, in the OSCE, the great thing is, you know, that there are about 57 government delegations, but there are also a few hundred NGO representatives. And the NGO representatives, they may have 1 or 2 minutes to speak up. And already this is very good, right? And he said, France is not hostile to religion. France is committed to non-segmented freedom of religion and belief and ensures the protection of universal and indivisible human rights. That's what he said. Meaning really that France is a secular state and is not mingling in religious affairs. What is the reality? The reality is that we have fakeries. And the French government is sponsoring fakeries with over 90% of the fakeries budget since, right since the start. So, in Austria, we have the representative of fakeries. He was a former, he is the former vice president of fakeries for many years. His name is Friedrich Gries. No, not the vice president. In fact, he was president for a while. Right? 7 court cases for lying, defamation, and hate speech in Austrian courts. And as a former president of fakeries and the former president of GSK, which is the Austrian fakeries group, imagine, you know. But in the fakeries leadership, he is not unique in this case. There are many like this, actually, with a very dubious record. And his disciple, or you could say his assistant, for many years became, 1998, the leader of the Federal Sect Office. In Austria, we have a Federal Sect Office, which was established in 1998. And the former manager of GSK, of the fakeries group, was appointed to be this head of the Austrian Federal Sect Office, which is basically a government-sponsored institution. And, you know, in the wake of this, already in 1998, 1999, Austrian government, the Ministry of Family, published a blacklist of 24 religious minority groups. Can you imagine? In a democratic country, they published a blacklist and massively distributed this blacklist of 24, almost all of them very peaceful groups. So this was published in 1998, and supported also by the Federal Sect Office. 2001, 2002, the government was forced to stop distribution because of international critique and outcry of the international human rights community and also of my organization, Forum. So this local Austrian fakeries group, GSK, was sponsored also by the city of Vienna. For example, altogether, since 1992 until 2008, over 219,000 euro. Well, 2008, the City of Vienna stopped sponsoring them because we exposed the nature of fakeries. My colleague Patricia, she was very helpful. So we published a press release that actually fakeries, the fakeries representative of Serbia, was involved with the Milosevic regime. He was the former general who was the head of the ethnic cleansing. You know, he advised the government on ethnic cleansing. You know? And a few months after this press release, the Vienna city government stopped sponsorship for this GSK. And now, this is one of the latest. I just don't want to give just the bad news, also the good news. The Federal Treasury in Austria, of the Austrian government, severely rebukes the Federal Sect Office. The Federal Sect Office has 6 employees, and since 1998, it is, until 2016, every year receives over 500,000 euro from the, taxpayers' money, from the government. And what are they doing? Basically, they are doing a Orwellian job on religious minority groups. They were rebuked in a special report by the Federal Treasury about the lack of transparency. In fact, this is exactly the points we criticize the Federal Sect Office since 15 years. Lack of transparency, lack of reporting to the public, sloppy financial management, lack of strategy. In spite of continual financing, which is over 500,000 euro per year, the decrease of work by 40%, over 40%. But the government still paid, this over 500,000 euro. So now it is serious for them, which is very good. Finally, the government shows responsibility in this. In Austria, I'm soon yeah, okay. In Austria, there has been a remarkable proliferation of anti-sect bureaucracies. Austria, with a population of 8.4 million, has no less than 29 anti-sect offices operating in the country. Proportionally, this marks an unmatched record in Europe and even on a global scale. Austria could win, in the Guinness Book of Records, including the Bundessektenstelle, which means the Federal Sect Office. There are 4 state-sponsored sect observation offices, 10 Catholic sect offices, 7 Protestant sect offices, 1 private sect office, and 7 offices for family counseling with special emphasis on sectarian issues. Can you imagine a small country like Austria? And ladies and gentlemen, I am almost done now. I just want to wrap it up. And I just hope that many other governments will follow Austria's example of, reducing their support for this repressive, organizations which repress religious freedom, which is one of the most important freedom rights of any human being. And and I hope also today we have the 30th session of the UPR, and I hope also the Russian political leaders will understand, this and make some changes. After all, what Mahatma Gandhi said, each civilization should be judged by the way it treats her minorities, right? So, if a civilization, if a government destroys civil society and represses minorities, that means the civilization is really downgraded and suffering. Or, we are here in Geneva, Henri Dunant, he said, we are all brothers, we are all brothers and sisters, of course, to be politically right, politically correct. We are all brothers and sisters. So why should we, repress each other? And Martin Luther King Jr., he said, I love this quote, we have to live together as brothers and sisters or perish together as fools. That is very true. So thank you very much. If you are interested in these issues, please check it out, 4f-europe.org. And thank you for your listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, for your presentation. And now I will give the floor to the second speaker, Madame Patricia Düvalь, an international attorney at law, expert in religion and human rights issues.
Yeah, hello. My intervention will cover the role played by anti-cult organizations in the repression of religious minorities in Russia, and in particular, the members of FECRIS, which has just been presented quite extensively, the European Federation of Centers of Research and Information on what they call sectarianism, which means they fight against what they label as sects, which are mainly groups that are not in traditional religions. So as Peter explained, FECRIS was created by the French in 1994 to export their model abroad in Europe and even broader. FECRIS has been financed over 92% by the French state, the French Prime Minister, since over the last 16 years. So the French members of FECRIS, there are 3 anti-cult associations in France that are members of FECRIS, are also financed at around between 94 and 98% of their budget by public funds. And in spite of its public financing by the French secular republic, and in spite of the French Constitution in particular, which states that the state respects every creed, and there is a separation between the state and churches. So in spite of this public financing by the French authorities, FECRIS has a Russian vice president, European international vice president, Alexander Dvorkin, who belongs to the Russian Orthodox Church. He heads a missionary department at the St. Tikhon University, Orthodox University in Moscow. And he's dedicated to fight against targeted religious minorities he sees as competitors to the Orthodox faith. He is the most infamous anti-sect activist in Russia and the Commonwealth of the Independent States, CIS. His militant activities are relying on the spiritual security concept, as defined by the Putin administration in 2000 as follows: assurance of the Russian Federation's national security also includes protecting the cultural and spiritual moral legacy and the historical traditions and standards of public life, and preserving the cultural heritage of all Russia's peoples. There must be a state policy to maintain the population's spiritual and moral welfare, prohibit the use of airtime to promote violence or base instincts, and counter the adverse impact of foreign religious organizations and missionaries. End of quote. Since then, since this was stated in 2000, Dworkin has used this concept as the grounds for a campaign against religious minorities, which is based on paranoia of foreign enemies and foreign ideas, and for measures to unduly restrict freedom of religion or belief of Russian citizens who have decided to follow a non-consensual spiritual path. This campaign has been based mainly on hate speech and disparagement against religious minorities. FECRI's Vice President, Dworkin, has engaged into hate speech and disparagement against so-called sects for over 20 years, accusing in particular religious minorities of being foreign agents acting as enemies to Russia. Dworkin has fueled suspicion and prejudice against the Mormons, Hare Krishna devotees, New Pentecostals, Falun Gong members, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, Hindus, and others, leading to repression such as banning, imprisonment, and incitement of hatred that has led to physical violence, threats, vandalism, and similar aggressions. As an example, just to give you a few concrete examples, in August 2009, Dworkin commented to the news agency Access, "Mormons are a huge international business corporation that operates under the guise of a religious organization. Moreover, we can recall several instances where American Mormon missionaries were spotted on the territory of secret military facilities. For many years, experts speak about the close relationship of this organization with the CIA." He commented further about New Life, which is one of the neo-Pentecostal sects, according to him, which is also known for its destructive activities. Quote, one of the most famous neo-Pentecostal preachers of the post-Soviet space, Alexei Lidyaev, openly speaks about the necessity to create a new world order in which new Pentecostals will rule with the US president at the head. Dworkin has a long history of hate speech in the media against religious minorities in Russia and the former Soviet states. For instance, during an interview for NTV, he paralleled Jehovah's Witnesses with drug dealers and called them slaves. Thereafter, the documentary was repeatedly cited as a motive for incitement to violence against Jehovah's Witnesses. Dworkin has also forwarded the idea that no dialogue should be established between the Orthodox Church and religious minorities, which is a big problem, because right now there is no dialogue between the Orthodox Church and religious minorities, and Dworkin is pushing that. So, for example, in August 2009, Alexander Dworkin commented for the news agency Access on the refusal of the Chelyabinsk Orthodox Diocese to participate in the opening day of an event because of the presence of Mormons and Neo-Pentecostals. Quote, from Dworkin, I think that the Chelyabinsk diocese made the only right decision when they refused to take part in the event in which representatives of totalitarian sects are involved. This is how he calls religious minorities. And he added, Orthodoxy is a traditional religion in our country, and any collaboration with such organizations is impossible. Imagine if some crooks, criminals, if some crooks have arranged their get-together and invited the police to participate in it. This is how he labels them. So this hate speech, with all these accusations and the foreign agents' accusations, he even calls them mafia regarding Jehovah's Witnesses and so on. This hate speech has fueled animosity against religious minorities in Russia, and incidents of physical violence have resulted from this stirring up of hatred, such as violence against persons, verbal insults, physical threats or attacks, and violence against property, including vandalism and attacks against places of worship, community property, and residences of members of religious groups. Lately, Dworkin, his hate speech against Hindus in Russia has caused a demonstration to protest Dworkin on February 2017 in front of the Russian embassy in New Delhi, India. My colleagues will develop on that. But Valery Rashkin, the Duma deputy of the Communist Party, shared the belief that Dworkin was behind the persecution that Shri Prakash Ji, the most prominent Hindu leader in Russia, and his followers have suffered, much the same way that Dworkin not only used the authorities to harass the Jehovah's Witnesses, but also stirred up anti-Jehovah's Witnesses sentiment among Russian nationalists. So, due to all this hate speech, he has induced the Russian government to adopt repressive measures also. Such activities of the Russian anti-cult movement are clearly a factor in the persistence and aggravation of the situation of religious minorities in Russia, in particular because of his accusations of foreign agents and so on. So we know that Putin has adopted measures like the law on foreign agents, which targets not only religious minorities, but all human rights NGOs like the SOVA Center. They have been declared to be foreign agents too, and to be actively working against the government. So on top of these activities for the Russian Orthodox Church and Fekris, Alexander Dworkin is also the head of the Expert Council on Conducting State Religious Expert Studies, which is under the main department of the Ministry of Justice, and he's been in that position for some years. The Council has been invested since 2009 with the power to investigate the activity, doctrines, leadership decisions, literature, and worship of any religious organization and recommend action to the Russian Ministry of Justice. Therefore, Dworkin, who is now the deputy head of the council, is in a position to advise the Russian Ministry of Justice regarding which groups should be permitted to register as religious organizations and which groups should not be considered religions. This is a big problem under the duty of neutrality of the state that Russia is committed to under the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, Article 18, that Peter mentioned before. and also Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights. In a landmark decision, Metropolitan Church of Bessarabia against Moldova in December 2001, the European Court of Human Rights has ruled that where in countries where there is authorization for registration system, traditional religions should not be on the board of the authorization body to decide on religious minorities' right to exist, right to registration, because this violates the duty of neutrality of the state in religious matters. Well, this is why the situation with Dworkin in Russia is a big problem. Also, under Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, there is a duty of neutrality that has been laid out by the United Nations Human Rights Committee in its Special Comment 22, General Comment 22 on freedom of religion. The Human Rights Committee explained and detailed very precisely that newly established religions or religious groups should not be discriminated because they are not traditional religions and because their beliefs are new to the people, and that governments should stay apart from such discrimination. So all these, Russia signed and committed to the covenant, also to the European Convention on Human Rights, but these commitments are completely violated by the present policy of Russia towards religious minorities and its use of the Orthodox Church to eliminate religious minorities and other beliefs in Russia. So I will give you a last aspect of this policy, which is, to my view, very stunning. It is the referral of followers of religious minorities to so-called rehabilitation centers in Russia. So Dworkin is also, apart from Fekris, and the council, expert council, he's also president of the St. Irenaeus of Lyons Center for Religious Studies, which is the Fekris member association in Russia. This center is an anti-sect center founded in 1993 with the blessing of the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei II. It's a missionary faculty department of St. Tikhon's Orthodox University in Moscow. The St. Irenaeus Center also heads a network of anti-sect associations called the Russian Association of Centers for Religious and Sectarian Studies, whose president is also Dworkin. And on the advice of this anti-sect network, families who disagree with the choice of one of their relatives to adhere to a non-traditional religion take them to so-called rehabilitation centers held by Orthodox priests, where these followers of minority religions are induced under pressure to recant their faith and return to the Orthodox fold. Now, this approach recalls the criticized deprogramming, which has been found to be illegal and to violate followers' right to freedom of religion or belief. Under Article 18.2 of the Covenant, no one shall be subject to coercion which would impair his freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice, which is also a right protected by the European Convention on Human Rights. So we have published a book, with Human Rights Without Frontiers. This is a book that studies the activities of FECRIS in 5 countries of Europe. There is France, Austria, Russia, Serbia, and Germany. I've been researching and writing the part of France, and there are also tables with tables about their financing, and this book has been translated into Russian, and it has in the Russian chapter names of the rehabilitation centers and all the specifics on them. So it's not just something we're making up. They exist. They are held by Orthodox priests, and they are there to make followers of new or minority beliefs come back to the Orthodox faith. This book is available, I mean the English one, it's also in French, on the Human Rights Without Frontiers website. So as a conclusion, I would like to say that FECRIS and its anti-cult associations in Russia should be preventing from continuing their harmful and illegal activities which violate the right of peaceful followers to religion or belief. States like Russia have a duty of neutrality in religious matters under international human rights law, a duty which has been constantly affirmed by the European Court of Human Rights and United Nations institutions. Dialogue can and should exist between recognized religions and religious minorities. And Russia should discontinue listening to those who constantly spread hatred and social unrest in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Dюваль, for your presentation. So now I will give the floor to Madame Olga Sibireva, religion expert of SOVA Center for Information and Analysis. SOVA Center for Information and Analysis is a Moscow-based Russian non-profit organization founded in October 2002. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. For many years, the level of xenophobia in Russia has sadly remained high. The most discriminated believers are people from non-Orthodox Christian denomination and new religious movements. A significant number of Russian citizens view them as cults, but the movement of Russian anti-cult cult fighters is not only Mr. Dworkin, and I would like to speak today about the people leading this so-called anti-cult struggle who formed public opinion in Russia regarding religious trends. Some participants of the battle against so-called cults are people of high status in Russian society. These include well-known experts who, unlike Dworkin, hold degrees recognized in Russia and who work in respected educational institutions. The first such person of note is Roman Silantiev. This religious scholar holds a PhD in history from the Moscow State Linguistic University. At the same time, he has worked in various Orthodox organizations and has for several years been the executive director of the Human Rights Center of the World Russian People's Council. This is a conservative Orthodox Christian organization. Both of Silantiev's dissertation papers were devoted to Muslim society in Russia. Both specialists of the topic and individual Muslims alike view the papers dubiously. Silantiev's 2005 book, The Recent History of Russia's Islamic Community, caused such outrage among the Council of Russian Muftis that it led to him being ejected from Russia's Interreligious Council. All the same, Silantif not only speaks as a scholar of Islam, but also as a specialist on other religions. His positions are similar to those of Dworkin. He assesses religious movements from the point of view of the Russian Orthodox Church. The concept of tolerance is alien to him. At the same time, his academic degree and position as a religious scholar give him a more serious status with journalists and state officials. Silantif is also a vice chairman of the Russian Ministry of Justice Expert Council on State Religious Studies. Among religious scholars, there are other specialists with similar views. For example, Larissa Astakhova, the head of the Religious Studies Department at Kazan Federal University. Like Silantif, Astakhova has the power to directly influence the state's officials' decisions about religious organizations, and as she is a member of an expert group created by the State Duma on the development of law in the sphere of freedom of religious belief and associations. As a scholar, Astakhova simply translates the position of the Russian Orthodox Church regarding new religious movements. She also supports the teaching of theology. Her regarding new religious movements, she also supports that her department's main task, as she sees it, that its students will, quote, know scripture well in department's main task, as she's order to keep a perfect orientation about the legitimacy of certain branches and deviations. They should know how to detect heresy. It was the opinion of a scholar. In Russia, theology is a confessional discipline. It differs from religious studies, where scholars study religious trends from a secular position. The introduction of theology as a scientific discipline has been met with resistance from the academic community. The conflict between theology, which is sympathetic to Orthodox position, and academic religious studies is well illustrated by the liquidation of Moscow Church of Scientology in November 2015. In a suit filed by the Ministry of Justice. Scholarly expertise given by Larissa Astakhova played a central role in this decision. She claimed to prove that churches of Scientology do not conduct religious activities and are not religious organizations. The court heard another 4 expert opinions, all of which reached the opposite conclusion. All the same, the court preferred Astakhova's version. After this case, leading Russian religious scholars published their reviews of Astakhova's testimony, criticizing her methods. She had looked at Scientology from the point of view of theistic religions and not as a new religious movement with its own features. The scholars' reaction to Astakhova was publicly viewed in Russia as a persecution. The Russian television station NTV, famous for its yellow journalism, ran a film about Scientology as a business cult. In addition to the usual anti-cult cliché, the film portrays experts speaking in support of the organization as degenerates. It became known shortly after the film that a defamation case had been filed against several religious scholars who had criticized Astakhova. Though investigators did not find enough basis to continue the case, Ekaterina Elbakyan, an opponent of Astakhova, who had spoken in support of the Scientologists, was fired from her job. The heads of the Academy of Labor and Social Relations were so scared of state pressure that they chose to dismiss a well-known religious scholar. I chose an example that features courtroom expertise for a reason. This type of expertise was a popular tool in Russia used to put pressure on parts of society that are not loyal to the authorities. This could be both individual people as well as organizations, including religious organizations. Also, writing expert opinion for the courts pays well, so many people want such work. It is not always true that such expert professional qualifications relate to areas they speak both expert. For example, the Center for Sociological Expertise, whose heads Natalie Krukova and Vitaly Batov, have been giving expert opinions since 2009. Their expertise has featured in several notable cases, including the Pussy Riot case and the extremist case about the slogan "Orthodoxy or Dead," and a few cases against a member of Russia's opposition. These experts, of course, have no specialized education on the subject of this case. Ms. Krukova, for example, is a mathematics teacher, while the Mr. Batov is a psychologist and culturologist. Every single one of the opinions is objectively incompetent. However, they never fail to make the conclusion, so they continue to be called for this type of work. One notable case featuring these so-called experts was the ban of Jehovah's Witnesses' Bible. Russia has a law that forbids courts from deeming an extremist the main text of any of the four main religions, that is the Bible, the Quran, the Tanakh, and the Hanju. However, these so-called experts conclude that the Jehovah's Witnesses version is actually not a Bible, since it, quote, differs from the King James version on the level on language, theme, and intertextuality. In particular, it was noted that instead of the word God, the version used the word Jehovah, and that since this book is not a Bible, it may be banned. Of course, such arguments counter any scientific methodology as well as common sense, but sadly they please the Russian courts when the right decision is needed. Recent years, the battle against cults in Russia has become a part of state politics. In fact, the officials and the state replaced the sect fighters. Now we have no scandal cases with expertises because last 2 years the officials used the more effective tool to discriminate new religious movements and Protestant denominations. Banning the center and local religious organizations of Jehovah's Witnesses as extremists has become the most massive repressive action against believers of the entire post-Soviet period. This decision has put tens of thousands of Russian citizens at risk of criminal prosecution for continuing to practice their religion. We already have at least 3 Jehovah's Witnesses who were arrested. Amendments from the Yarovaya-Ozerov package of laws that restrict missionary activity are still actively used with respect to new religious movements and Protestant organizations. But the state needs to justify the necessity of such action, so the experts who are famous for their anti-cult position can be called by the authorities any moment, and I'm sure they will be ready to do it. So thank you.
Thank you for your expertise and the situation in Russia. So now I will give the floor to Shri Prakash Ji, leader of Hinduism in Russia and president of the Center for the Conservation of the Indian Cultures. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My greetings to all people who have assembled here today in the Palace of Nations, Geneva. The speakers who have come before me have highlighted the situation with religious freedom in Russia. I would like to share with you my experience of 28 years living and working in the wonderful country. It is a mixture of different emotions, mostly positive one, if not for the last 3 years of unimaginable struggle. It was the year 1990 when I first came to Russia. A lot of things have changed beyond recognition since then. The capital of Russia, Moscow, has developed into a huge European city that offers a lot of opportunities to its inhabitants. In the year 1999, we first started our religious and culture work. It was very warmly welcomed by the local, and people from all over Russia started visiting our center in Moscow. Russians came to know our culture center, Shri Prakash Dham, as one of the most prominent organizations dealing on the grounds of international cooperation between Russia and India. Apart from the center, we registered Hinduism as an official religious group with the Law Ministry of Russia. Our hard work has resulted in the opening up of our centers not only in Moscow but also in other Russian cities like Saratov, Yaroslavl, Ryazan, Vaskyria, St. Petersburg, Volgograd, and many more. As the year passed, we extended our work internationally, which resulted in the opening up of our centers in countries like Germany, United Kingdom, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Lithuania, and India. People who are interested in Indian culture and religion of Hinduism visit our ashram in Moscow, numbering thousands, and my work has been guiding them on their life path and teaching them love, peace, and harmony, which are the three most important pillars of Hinduism. It is a point to note that by God's grace, I was given the chance to guide people spiritually and view this as my most important role. Spirituality and religion are very different. The person can be religious but not necessarily spiritual. A spiritual person, on the other hand, can be religious and spiritually aware at the same time. Therefore, with the carrying out of my responsibilities as the leader of Hinduism in Russia, people also started viewing me as their spiritual master. From the very beginning of my journey, I had to face many different struggles. But it's a point to note that the biggest struggle that I, my family, and my disciples had to face began just 3 years ago and is still going on. I believe that wherever there are forces preaching love and harmony, there will also be powers that fight against them, as it is not in their interest to allow positive forces to enter the life of common people. This is perhaps the most steadfast rule of spirituality. 3 years ago, a person came to me and told me about the existence of an internet forum that denigrates and insults every religion except Orthodox Christianity. The name of website is irene.ru, and it has been named after the Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, France. The site concentrated a lot of slandering Hinduism, and about 80% of all information was dedicated towards it. Phrases like holy demonic festival, Krishna is the god of sins and demonic possession, Hinduism, the religion of Antichrist, were widespread on this forum. Obviously, after hearing all this, I wrote a letter to the administrator of the forum. But the answer we got was very much unsettling. we got an answer that if we will send any more such letters, their organization will start a similar campaign against me and my work. Only 1 or 2 weeks had passed and a page was opened against me on the same forum. After all this, my disciples conducted a research on who was the owner of this website and who was behind the infamous organization of Russian Association of Centers for the Study of Religions and Cults. It turns out that it was a person named Alexander Dworkin. The most interesting part was that I never before have heard of any such organization or a person. All this was a new kind of situation for us, but the fact that such slander and threats were being spread against me and my family made us think about employing legal measure to counter these information attacks. Then other very big information attack happened on us in the year 2016. A false news report about our organization was shown on the Russian federal channel NTV. After this, we had no doubts about the strength of the forces we are facing. These forces had serious plans and there could have been no doubt about their malevolent intentions. After we took the judicial path, we also come to know about their influence within the law structure of Russia. Our case continued for 2 years and eventually was dismissed by the court under the pretext of freedom of speech and difficulty of identifying people behind the users of the forum. While the case was going on, 2 more information attacks occurred on our center and both were in the form of TV report on Russian federal channels. One of TVC and other was Russia 1. All these attacks were aimed and scaring us, threatening us. The threats actually become for us the norm as we received them almost every week on email and phone. But this time they had to be proven wrong. I decided that we will fight for our safety and well-being no matter what the cost might be. One thing was sure, Dworkin has his own people in every governmental structure and in most of the media channels. This was an order from above, and the order was to eliminate our organization. They never expected us to last more than 8 months, but we did last and we are still continuing the fight. We had to employ all the options that we had at hand or else our existence and well-being were under direct threat. My children went to school and university in Moscow every day, and you can probably imagine the state of worried father who had concern for his children at the time when all our private information and addresses were being given out on Dworkin's websites. The options and instruments that we had at our disposal were many, but the most effective one was obviously the support from Indian government. They had to step up, and at one point they did step up. In the early 2017, protests occurred in front of Russian embassy, which resulted in the Russian embassy having talks with the External Affairs Ministry of India. Dworkin never expected such fast reaction from us, and he had to put a pause his plans. But the key word here is pause. After a pause of a few months, he started the information campaign again. There were almost 60 above pages of total slander on his forum, and no one has been concerned about it. Journalists, or should I say goons, were being sent to us every 2 weeks, and there was also the unsettling incident on 11th of December 2016, when a group of nationalists, goons, wanted to forcefully enter our ashram's premises. Then come the long-awaited support from Russian Communist Party. The communists drafted a parliamentary resolution against Dworkin, and this was a unique event in itself. But Dworkin has got his own bosses. that are not less powerful, and eventually there is something that they are worried about whenever they see me. Why is it that the Forum on Dworkin's pages has more than 100 pages of slander already and they have no plans to stop? The explanation that I have gotten from various religious experts in the Dworkin and the radical wings of Russian Orthodox Church view their peoples as their possession. They are scared to lose their people to other religious groups, but they forget that they cannot stop people from having the natural desire of attaining inner peace and harmony. Instead of criticizing others, you should try to develop these qualities within your organization, but it seems that Dworkin and his people have been programmed to act within certain unlawful framework and continue their extremist activities no matter what will be the effect of international relation between India and Russia. The recent activities of Dworkin prove once again the unauthorized police raids has happened in our center were conducted under the orders of church higher up, and effect were carried out by the nationalist group that work in the police law under the roof of church. This was the most loud challenge from the side of Dworkin, and we knew that only international support would help us to tackle down this horrific attack. A conference was conducted in Duma, which was the first its kind. Other minority religions came up to our cause and showed their support, especially Islam and Buddhism. International media jumped into our cause, and news of continuous attacks on our center and ashram reverberated all over the world. The Russians that dislike the activities of Dworkin stood with us and are still supporting us. Right now, all I can say that I was never taught to disband and run away from any big problems since my childhood. I am going to continue this fight for my faith, my disciples, no matter what the cost, and I need the support of the international community. Prasun Prakash, the next speaker, will tell you in details about the formal side of issue and our request towards the United Nations. But the most important thing right now is come together and try to solve this problem once and for all us. It might be late afterwards. I wish everyone all the very best. Their endeavors. Freedom is the essence of everything. It is freedom that helps in the overall development of the human personality and allow him or her to flourish in any chosen field. Thank you. Radhe Radhe. Thank you.
Our last speaker, Affair in the Center for the Conservation of the Indian Culture. So the floor is yours.
Dear guests and participants of today's session on the Russian Federation and religious freedom, we have assembled here for a reason that demands our attention and requires at this stage an international platform to spread the concern of tens and thousands of believers, which are considered by the civilized world as the followers of one of the largest religions. One such platform is the United Nations, the credibility and importance of which cannot be a subject of neglect. My name is Prasun Prakash, and I am the Director of Public Affairs in the Center for Conservation of Indian Culture, Shri Prakash Dham, in Moscow, Russia. The previous speaker already talked about the history of our center and the activities that are conducted there. Therefore, I would not like to waste your time with that and move straight, but not in a hurry, towards the main issue that has been a burning topic for many religious experts and people who conduct religious endeavors in all accordance to the international and regional laws in the wonderful country, Russia. The concept of bad religion. Religion is a concept that establishes itself on a free will zone, and it cannot be bad as long as it does not harm the well-being of the society and the person professing it, be it the physical or the mental well-being. But the walls that surround this free will zone are almost intangible, and therefore make the process of rating a faith as bad or good, very easy for the people who have put upon themselves the responsibility of playing out the roles of religious policemen. One such policeman, who is infamous for his illogical crusades against minority religions on Russian soil, is this gentleman, Alexander Dworkin. I suppose that the speakers of today's session are well acquainted with this personality. For the people assembled here that do not know much, and Thierry has told me that the Russian delegation is present over here, I would like to give out his brief biography. A citizen of the United States of America who labels himself as the expert in the knowledge of religion and cults and uses this so-called knowledge in carrying out his religious orders, bordering on the line of political. Organizing these orders is a part of the work that's in the task list of his not less infamous bosses in Russia and abroad. He is also the president of the Russian Association of Organizations for Researching Religions and Cults, an organization that can be very well labeled as an organized criminal grouping, if not for its high up there connections, because we all know that Alexander Dworkin holds the seat in the Expert Council of Russia's Justice Ministry. And in Russian, because the translation of this council is not correct everywhere, it's called the Комитет по религиозным делам при Государственной Думе. Who are these bosses? Why are they targeting the president of our organization, Shri Prakash Ji? What is their agenda? How they plan out their attack? Their shady connections with the criminal world? Who has stepped up to help us? What we see as being the end of the struggle? And last but not the least, in what way would we like the UN to get involved into this issue? We'll try to dwell deeper into this complex algorithm of logical and important questions, keeping in mind the limited time that I have. Shri Prakash Ji talked about the spiritual work and the fact that he has been doing it in Russia for more than 20 years. Everything was good until the year 2015. In the autumn of that year, Shri Prakash Ji stepped up to defend the slandering and humiliation of Hindu faith and its principles. Hinduism is his religion since birth, and after we registered our religious group in the early 2000s, he also officially became the leader and representative of it in Russia. It was only natural for him to write the letter to Dworkin, asking him in the most calm and civilized manner to remove the information that he claims to be a product of his self-made research. From his internet website, by the way, irene.ru, that was already mentioned by Mrs. Dюваль. Well, the answer we got from Dworkin reflected his racist and ultra-nationalist views, and before we could even plan what should be done next, the information attack took place. A TV report attacking the image of Shri Prakash Ji and his work appeared on the Russian federal channel NTV. Obviously, there was a genuine shockwave that went through us at that moment. One thing that we were sure of is the fact that we had to plan a strategy as early as possible with the limited resources we had if compared to Dworkin and his organization. The strategy we planned has now become a universal call that reverberated all over the world in the most unexpected and positive way. But perhaps the most important thing it opened before us was the reasoning that guides these Orthodox crusaders. It is as simple as the clearest of sunny days. Prakash Ji's rising popularity. He is viewed as a spiritual leader by not only those who are interested in Hinduism, but by people that come from all walks of life and themselves profess religions that are diverse from his own. Orthodox Christians view Shri Prakash Ji as their mentor and father figure, which is obviously a big threat for the radically inclined members of the church. And it's important to note over here that not the whole Orthodox Church is against my father, but it's this majority that is being included in the radical wing, the so-called radical wing, that is against him. The church views the Russian people as their property and consider that they are the only ones who have the right to guide them on their spiritual path. The existence of my father became a threat to that, and thinking now, I understand that this was something bound to happen. We can very well understand the level of their fear before our organization the level of defeat before our organization, at least from the very simple fact that there are so many absurdities circulating and accusations made by Alexander Dworkin himself personally. Statements like, Shri Prakash Ji is the Antichrist. Shri Prakash Ji wants to become the spiritual leader of Russia. Shri Prakash Ji is an incarnation of a Russian saint. And many more are nothing but provocations from the side of radical goons that are none other but wolves in the attire of sheep. By making such statements, it's easier to attract the attention of fascist elements that work under Dworkin and discredit the image of a person in front of the Russian government. Relationship of which towards us was always neutral and at times even considerate. Our case is different due to many reasons. This is the first time when Alexander Dworkin is facing a leader acknowledged by thousands of people, a political party, and other faiths. Shri Prakash Ji is not a book like Bhagavad Gita that you could burn. He is not an organization that could be closed. He is person breathing and living, who has the full backing of his disciples, who are ready to give their 100% towards helping him. All this is out of bounds for Dworkin's wildest possible conscious dealings, and although it sounds like a beginning to a blockbuster Hollywood movie, this is the harsh reality that we have been going through for the past 3 years. Now that I have spoken about the reason behind these horrific attacks, I would like to shine the light on the scheme and algorithm of instruments that Dworkin and his organization use to attain the goals set by their bosses sitting in the church, government, and media. The goal they have is none other but labeling the religious or any other organization as one that professes bad religion and exterminate it as fast as possible. But before I talk about this, it's important to understand Dworkin's opinion about Hinduism and the essence of his judgment that puts us in a position where we understand the whole threat his activities pose for us, and speaking more globally, for the international relationships between India and Russia. Alexander Dworkin, he talks about Hinduism, labeling it as a religion of Antichrist, and this is total absurdity. Now, let me do a bit of the translation work if the video would have played. So, quote by quote, Dworkin considers Hinduism the religion of the Antichrist and speaks about its demonic nature. My dear friends, is this the right way of doing about with sensitive issues in the 21st century? Do not forget that the higher-ups of the church's radical wing think the same, and Dworkin is just their audio player. Apart from these aren't just words but statements that constitute the tip of his independent research on cults and sects. Now that we have this as our background, it becomes much easier to understand everything that will follow. Going back to the scheme and instruments. Instrument number one, or should I say step number one of the scheme, is the forum on the website of his organization, irony.ru. The forum is the platform where the provocations and slander begin. This is where he and his colleagues start the work of labeling an organization as one under the influence of bad religion. All sorts of radical, nationalist, and extremist sayings are used in order to attract the attention of radical and nationalist groupings that work under the church's ultra wing. We should keep in mind, though, that these elements are their primary audience. You can imagine our state of mind when our private information was given out to such people. When our private information was given out to such people on this forum. Shri Prakash Ji is continuing being attacked and humiliated till date, and even the Russian law is helpless. Well, it is obvious when we see that Dworkin has connections in the law ministry of Russia. Statements denigrating Hinduism, our nationality, and our friends and family that you see on the slide are just the tip of the iceberg as the pages number in hundreds to this day. The second instrument is the media. It should not come to you as a shock that majority of the media in Russia is under very harsh control, and many of the media outlets have got their own offices, or you can say committees, in which the people from the church are sitting. And they help the board of directors in formulating the guidelines of their work. Media affects the human mind, and human mind is the thing they strive to conquer. We were victims of this many times, but the biggest attacks that happened on us took place on the Russian television and newspapers. Россия 1, NTV, TVC, and REN-TV are some of the biggest channels in Russia, and all of them showed fake reports on Shri Prakash Ji. Again, the key factor is their interest in Shri Prakash Ji. No person before him was attacked on such a massive scale. Speaking of media, one very interesting thing is how they send radical goons dressed as TV reporters to morally terrorize us. The incident that happened on the 11th of December 2016, where a journalist was forcefully trying to enter our center, is just one such example. This has happened almost every 2 weeks till this date, with some distinct intervals in between. The Russian media will never show the struggle we are facing, because that will make a hero out of Shri Prakash Ji, and this will be the biggest mistake that they could possibly make. Now, after the material on the forum and media has been cultivated by Dworkin, these are sent to their own people in the police structures. They conduct unauthorized raids, and these are conducted by the ultra-fascist radicals that work in thousands in the Russian police. They only await an order from above, saying that their officers will literally get a Medal of Honor from the church if they successfully close down the object of concern. We also fell victim to this on the fatal second day of November, when the police conducted an unauthorized search in our apartment and ashram. Our lawyers studied the material and concluded that there was no judicial reason for organizing such an event. Moreover, they used total violence, and what we faced afterwards in the department was the most outrageous thing that happened till date. Now, if Terry would allow me, I would like to take out my computer and show the recording to the Russian delegation and to the people assembled here, because the videos are not working on the presentation. Now, for you to understand what was happening at the time, we were in the police department. It's the UVD по ЗАО, which is the Западный административный округ, the western region of Moscow. And when we were inside over there, there came a 2-meter-long guy with a swastika on his neck. I'm not kidding, there was a swastika on his neck. And he said the following threats to me and my father, after he kicked me out, literally, kicked me out of that room. And this is the recording I captured when I took out my iPhone outside that room. So just a second, it's really interesting. Now, for the people who have not understood what the guy was saying, he was saying, в России, в православной стране, всякой заморской нечисти не имеется места быть. Which means, in translating from Russian to English, in Russia, an Orthodox country, there is no place for foreign impurities. And he was saying this in the 21st century to the citizens of India that are considered to be friendly to Russia. So you see for yourself. Now, because the internet is working, I would like to show the previous video that didn't open, using this opportunity, where Dworkin is talking about Hinduism, because I have the link to that also. Oh, I'm really sorry, I don't have the link to that, but I have the link to the journalists coming to our ashram, as I already said, and you will see for yourself, these are not journalists. Okay, these are not journalists, these are people who are pretending to be journalists and trying to mentally pressurize us into saying something or doing something or provocating us. I'm so sorry there's no video, but yeah. А что за ЧП?
Ну, ЧП произошло в редакции, собственно говоря, на индуизм очень сильно наседают. Руководство отправило меня на специальное задание. Я же не могла ночью человеку позвонить, правильно?
Чрезвычайно. I will stop the audio here and just show to you all the people that are standing. I know it's not really visible, but you see this guy smoking cigarette, standing there he's not a journalist, right? Does he look like one? No. So these kind of goons are being sent to us every 2 weeks, and we are facing this. So, and obviously we are writing letters to the Russian government, and they are applying us, but this thing should be stopped. This thing should be stopped. And this is our struggle right now. So now, after the material on the forum and the media, as has been already told by me, has been cultivated, Dworkin sends it to the people in the police departments, like the one I had showed the audio recording of, who have these kind of opinions. And after that, they basically what happens after that is that whenever we write a letter to the police department with a complaint, our letters are being shut and put in a cupboard so that the higher-up officials don't see that. Because if the higher-up officials might see that, they might take action, right? But the lower-up officials, they hide those documents so that they're never visible. That's the point I'm making over here. And the other very unsettling thing is that Dworkin has his own people in the Duma. There are politicians in the Duma who are showing support to Dworkin. And this is insanity. Now, the fourth vicious instrument at their disposal are the various ultra-nationalist groups that show themselves to be more of some religious enlightenment societies for youngsters. Anything but religion although exists in these structures, these radicals conduct all the near criminal activities, and their main aim is to install fear in the victim so that they stop carrying out their work in Russia. Getting calls and threats, as I already said, from them has become a habit for us now. Following me to work, to college, and all the things imaginable have happened to us. It's important to highlight the political backing that these groups have got that makes them even more poisonous. These are the people so blinded by Dworkin's organization that if the order comes, they can even murder and pillage. The fifth method is the instrument that has come to light after the attacks on us and the existence of which was not guaranteed until recently. The network of agents and spies that work for Dworkin's bosses. What is the role of agents? Well, the answer is more simple than you might expect it to be. Being inculcated into the object of attack and then after some time gaining the faith of its members. After this has been done, the agent leaves the organization on the pretext of some or the other reason. In no time you will see that person spreading false information, saying that he or she fell victim to a religious cult or sect. More than 3,000 such people work all over Russia. You will ask me from where to have all this information? What is the source? Well, fortunately, we have formed friendly relations with the Russian people who have seen our resilience, as we are the ones who have continued fighting no matter what. Facing these 3 years of nightmare, which is still going on, there are people in the Russian government and the Russian government agencies that are my good friends and the names of whom I wouldn't make public. The alliance around us is just one of the many things that has helped us on this thorny and dangerous path. Last but not the least is the way to connect the disciples of Shri Prakash Ji and him in a way that if the person is his disciple, this equates to him being, as they like to say, a zombie. On the 2nd of November, and a few days after that, the police were trying to make a connection between the business of Shri Prakash Ji's disciple and him by saying that everything the disciple does, even in business, is directed somehow by Shri Prakash Ji. My dear friends, if tomorrow a politician visits my father and implements a policy after that, that would not mean that Shri Prakash Ji had an interest in that. That would just mean politician doing his work, right? Right. Now, many actions had to be taken to defend. And moving on towards these efforts in this ongoing series of attacks on Shri Prakash Ji. The factors that play on our side right now is the support we have from the local Russians. Disciples numbering in thousands are standing shoulder to shoulder with us in this very interesting defensive war. The importance of manpower cannot be neglected, as an individual in his essence is the beginning and end to all the political processes. Disciples of Shri Prakash Ji live not only in Russia, but also in countries like India, Germany, Lithuania, Ukraine, UK, and many more. It is important to mention that apart from the regular disciples, there are millions of Hindus living all over the planet Earth who have come up and showed never before seen support. In the beginning of the year 2017, an effigy of Dworkin was burned by more than 1,000 people in front of the Russian embassy in Delhi, which resulted in the Ministry of External Affairs of India reacting and giving out instructions to the Embassy of India in Moscow. If you would allow me just 1 minute, on the internet there is a Russian TV news report that showed these protests, and I would like to show it to you. Thierry, do we have time? No? I'm really sorry then. Well, basically the video, if someone is interested, I will send the link afterwards. But I will be ending right now my speech by talking about our efforts and saying what we want from the United Nations. As I said, the bureaucracy and its machinery is a very complex thing, and it would take me another 15 minutes to talk about it. But describing the work of the government of both countries in short, the following can be very well said. They are mute until pressure is created around them, and only after that do they consider taking action. The religious matter can be compared to reactive substances, working with which can prove fatal for all the sides interested in carrying on with their respective research inside the laboratory. We have sent multiple letters to the Prime Minister's office in India, administration of Vladimir Putin, embassy, and other government structures. Sometimes they reply, sometimes they do not. But even when they reply, it is usually a sort of letter you get from a long-distance relative who pays his condolences on the death of someone's grandfather. I can although tell the people assembled here that maintaining this correspondency is a huge job in itself, and no matter what, it should be done. If you ask me about the demands that we have from the government of Russia and India, or being more precise, from the leaders of both countries, it is not just initiating, but bringing to fruition the talks on this alarming issue. It's high time both the governments understand that it's better to avert disease instead of patiently waiting for the virus to take a firm grip on the historically friendly relations between the two countries. The Embassy of India in Moscow should work more actively as the situation escalates, and we hope that they will after today's session in the walls of Palais des Nations. One more thing that is necessary to maintain the justice is the openness of the dialogue, as a dialogue behind closed doors without our participation would not be the best form of solution. The specific departments of the Indian government must launch an active investigation that will finally label Dworkin and his companions as lawbreakers. A thorough investigation should be launched by the Russian government into the working of Dworkin's organization, Ratsirs. Now, ending my speech, coming to the actions we would like to be taken by the international community in the face of United Nations. Initiating an intergovernmental study and investigation into the religious freedom in Russia that would result in the formation of a detailed document or report. The topic of religious freedom in Russia goes hand in hand with many other burning issues that come out from the vast expanses of the country. Conducting more and more sessions of the sort where the victims can speak out. Third, beginning of a judicial process outside Russia concerning our plight and struggle with the rigid system where everything is dominated by the people from the church. 4. Help us organize more meetings with people of responsibility and power, whose agenda is on total accordance with the agenda of the United Nations, and who could be of help for us and many other innocent victims. Pressurizing the governments of both India and Russia. Number 5, to finally move on to the final stages and stop the further negative development and deterioration of the problem. 6, and the last but not the least, forming, if necessary, a separate commission or department that would deal with problems of religious freedom in Russia and maintaining regular members in it. The struggle is long and dangerous, but one thing is sure, we are not going to move back at any cost. What can help us right now is the international awareness which could be generated by the work of the United Nations. I would like to thank everyone for patience. Patience was necessary today, and support. Hope to meet you all again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. So that will conclude the speaker. So if there are any question, is the time for question. So feel free to ask. So I will conclude. You see the situation. You hear from experts and testimonies on the ground on what is going on in Russia and religious freedom. So I hope that the United Nations and delegation will take the voice to raise this problem at the next UPR session. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.